What does it take for a continent that has bled for centuries under the weight of colonial exploitation to reclaim its dignity? For African leaders like Burkina Faso's captain Ibrahim Traoré, the answer lies in challenging the deeply ingrained systems of imperialism, no matter how powerful the opposition might be. In a powerful and deeply emotional speech delivered in Ouagadougou, Traoré unleashed a scathing critique of French President Emmanuel Macron, accusing him of insulting Africa and perpetuating outdated colonial attitudes. This wasn't just another diplomatic spat. Traoré's words resonated across the continent, speaking to a shared frustration with the lingering influence of France and the refusal of African nations to remain shackled by historical agreements. Chapter 1. Macron's reflection on France's role in Africa. To fully appreciate the gravity of Traoré's declarations, one must first understand the context of Macron's speech delivered on January 6th. Macron accused African leaders of ingratitude following the expulsion of French troops from several nations, blaming them for failing to combat anti-French sentiments fueled by what he deemed as misinformation and interference. He portrayed France's withdrawal as a reluctant but polite response to changing priorities among African leaders. Macron emphasized that the French presence was once pivotal for these nations' sovereignty, going as far as to criticize these leaders for their perceived lack of courage in addressing public opinion. This thinly veiled critique of Africa's evolving independence set the stage for Captain Traoré's unapologetic rebuttal. Macron's speech oscillated between a defensive justification of France's historical involvement in Africa and a call for a new era of partnerships. He acknowledged the legacy of French military and cultural influence, but lamented that this legacy had become a source of resentment rather than pride. Macron framed the French withdrawal as a strategic realignment rather than a retreat, noting that their presence had become a target for misinformation and distrust. He also highlighted France's efforts to reimagine its role, focusing on strategic defense partnerships and fostering relationships with emerging powers on the continent. However, his words carried undertones of paternalism, suggesting that African leaders owed their sovereignty to France's military sacrifices and support. Chapter 2. Macron's comments. He openly criticized Sahelian governments, particularly those that had expelled French forces, claiming they had forgotten to say thank you for France's military assistance in combating insurgencies in the region. Macron even described African leaders as ungrateful and suggested that without French intervention, many would not enjoy the sovereignty they currently do. Macron's comments seem to ignore the complex history of French-African relations rooted in colonialism, exploitation, and the extraction of wealth from African nations. Instead, he portrayed France as a benevolent power, magnanimously aiding struggling African nations while receiving nothing in return. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré was having none of it. Chapter 3. Traoré's explosive rebuttal. Speaking with fiery conviction, Traoré didn't mince words. "He has humiliated all Africans," Traoré said of Macron. "This is how this gentleman sees Africa and Africans. We are not human beings in his eyes." His speech was as much a rebuttal as it was a rallying cry. Traoré reminded Macron and the world that Africa's contributions to France's wealth and development cannot be ignored. From the colonial era to modern times, African resources and labor have played a pivotal role in building France's economy. "If there is an ungrateful person, it is him," Traoré declared. "France exists today thanks to our ancestors. They should pray for us." This stark reminder of historical realities was a direct counterpoint to Macron's claims. While Macron lamented Africa's alleged ingratitude, Traoré pointed to the centuries of exploitation that left Africa impoverished and France prosperous. Chapter 4. The cost of assistance. Macron's comments about France's military interventions painted a picture of a country altruistically aiding Africa in its fight against terrorism. But many Africans, including Traoré, see these interventions as little more than a continuation of neo-colonial practices. French military operations in the Sahel, such as Operation Serval in 2013 and Operation Barkhane, have often been touted as efforts to stabilize the region. Yet, these operations coincided with the protection of French economic interests, including access to vital resources like uranium and gold. Traoré accused Paris of pivoting toward a new strategy to maintain its grip on African nations, even as its troops withdraw from countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. They will not leave certain countries, Traoré warned. They will set up security companies to secure their companies, which are in these countries. But the soldiers will be there. You will no longer see them in uniform or gathered in bases. This accusation sheds light on the growing presence of private military contractors, which some see as a covert way for France to continue exerting influence without the visible footprint of state-backed forces. Chapter 5: Breaking the Chains. At the heart of Traoré's speech was a call for African nations to take bold steps toward true independence. For him, this means not only expelling French forces, but also dismantling the military agreements that underpin their presence. It is the only way to have an independent army, to build ourselves and to be strong, he said. These agreements, signed in the aftermath of African independence, have often been criticized for granting France disproportionate influence over African military and political affairs. Traoré also singled out French military advisors as particularly insidious. In the French system, the most dangerous ones are the military advisors, he said. They are the ones responsible for putting France's policy in Africa into practice. His message was clear. African nations must not only reject foreign troops, but also remove the frameworks that allow external powers to interfere in their affairs. Chapter 6: A Growing Movement. Traoré's stance is part of a larger trend across the continent. Over the past few years, several African nations have expelled French troops and closed French military bases. Burkina Faso was among the first to take this step, with the military government leading the charge in January 2022. Mali and Niger followed suit, rejecting the presence of French forces and signaling a broader rejection of France's role in the region. Even traditionally pro-French nations like Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Chad have demanded the withdrawal of French troops. By the end of January, French forces are expected to complete their withdrawal from Chad, leaving only Djibouti and Gabon as the remaining African nations with a French military presence. This growing movement reflects a broader desire among African nations to assert their sovereignty and chart their own path forward. Chapter 7: Macron's Miscalculation. For many Africans, Macron's remarks about gratitude and sovereignty were tone-deaf and deeply insulting. By framing France's interventions as acts of generosity, Macron ignored the agency and sacrifices of African nations. His comments also failed to account for the growing frustration with France's role in Africa. As Traoré pointed out, the relationship between France and its former colonies is not one of equals, but one rooted in historical exploitation and imbalance. By portraying African leaders as ungrateful, Macron only reinforced the perception of France as a paternalistic power unwilling to accept Africa's desire for self-determination. Chapter 8: A Vision for a Free Africa. Traoré urged his fellow leaders to break free from the colonial mindset and work together to build a future defined by unity, self-reliance, and pride. If you want to break with these imperialist forces, it's simple. We must denounce the agreements, he said. For Traoré, the path to independence begins with dismantling the colonial defense agreements that have bound Africa to France since the era of independence. He also called on Africans to decolonize their minds and embrace their identity. If we lose our culture, we lose our identity, Traoré said, emphasizing the importance of preserving Africa's rich heritage while pursuing progress and innovation. Chapter 9: Empowering the Diaspora. Traoré also addressed the concerns of the Burkinabe diaspora, assuring them that his government is committed to modernizing administrative processes and improving representation abroad. He encouraged them to leverage Ghana's innovative spirit to transfer technology and ideas back to Burkina Faso. viewing their presence in Ghana as an opportunity for growth and development. "You have the chance to be in Ghana, an ingenious country," he said, urging Burkinabe citizens to foster innovation and strengthen ties between the two nations. Traoré's vision extends beyond immediate challenges, emphasizing the role of the diaspora in shaping the future of Burkina Faso through technology, education, and entrepreneurship. Chapter 10: Reimagining Agriculture and Industry. One of the core themes of Traoré's speech was self-sufficiency. He lamented that despite vast potential, Burkina Faso and other African nations remain heavily dependent on food imports. "We cannot imagine that in this 21st century. We will continue to import almost all of our food from abroad," he said. Traoré called for investments in agriculture and food production, envisioning a future where Burkina Faso becomes a hub of industrial and agricultural innovation. His words reflected a broader push for economic independence, urging African nations to harness their resources and reduce reliance on foreign aid and imports. Chapter 11: Preserving Culture and Identity. For Traoré, cultural preservation is as crucial as economic and political independence. He stressed the importance of teaching younger generations about their roots, warning that losing one's culture is akin to losing one's identity. "If we lose our culture, we lose our identity," he declared. To this end, his government has established a day dedicated to celebrating Burkina Faso's roots, reinforcing the connection between cultural heritage and national pride. Traoré's emphasis on culture serves as a reminder that Africa's strength lies in its diversity and shared history, which must be cherished and protected. Traoré's speech concluded with a powerful vision for Burkina Faso and Africa. He expressed unwavering confidence that the challenges facing his nation would be overcome, declaring, "Burkina Faso will shine. Burkina Faso will be great. Our dream will come true if God pleases." Chapter 12: Reclaiming the Narrative. For centuries, Africa has been defined by narratives imposed from the outside. Traoré's speech is a bold attempt to reclaim that narrative and put Africa's aspirations front and center. His words resonated deeply with audiences across the continent, inspiring a new wave of Pan-African consciousness. For many, Traoré represents a new generation of leaders willing to stand up to powerful nations and demand respect and equality. As Burkina Faso and other nations take steps to sever ties with France, the road ahead will not be easy. But for leaders like Traoré, the challenges are worth it. His vision for a self-reliant Africa, one that is united, proud, and free from exploitation, has struck a chord with millions across the continent. What do you think about Ibrahim Traoré's bold stance? If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives.